It's time for Talk Law Radio with Todd Marquardt. Todd Marquardt, attorney at law in Texas. If you're a millionaire or a thousandaire, Talk Law Radio is now on the air. Call in with your business law question, your elder law question, veteran aid, Medicaid, build a business to get paid. 210-308-8867. Or ask a question online at marquardtlawfirm.com. That's MARQUARDT lawfirm.com. And now it's Talk Law Radio with Todd Marquardt.
Now it's time to discover your legal issue blind spots by listening to me talk about the law on the radio. This is Talk Law Radio. I'm Todd Marquardt, and we're going to explore the proposed amendments to the Texas Constitution. We're going to do an overview of the proposed changes that could significantly impact individuals and businesses across the state. The proposed amendments may go unnoticed, but can have far-reaching consequences. Today we're going to focus on the tax-related proposals. Several propositions aim to eliminate or modify various taxes, such as the proposed bans on capital gains taxes, taxes on the stockbroker occupation, and inheritance taxes. And the show will also talk about inventory taxes, those affecting animal feed and business equipment that could influence the financial landscape for many Texans. Property tax reforms are another key topic, with amendments designed to provide relief for specific groups. These include benefits for veteran spouses, assistance for homeowners whose properties have been destroyed by fire, and expanded relief for elderly or disabled homeowners. We'll also cover broader reforms intended to support homeowners in general. After the show, search for a special podcast and YouTube episode to learn about the other 7 proposed amendments. So what's on the ballot today? Well, what's going to be on the ballot November 4th? So this show is airing on Sunday. What is that? November the 2nd. But the election is going to be Tuesday, November 4th. So make sure you go out and vote. A majority of the proposed constitutional amendments are measures meant to lower various taxes for Texans, which I just went over, so I won't go over that again. So the first one I'd like to talk about is proposition number 2. And you'll probably notice that I'm going out of order. I wanted to group the proposals by subject, by the type of amendment. And so, like I said, today in this segment, we're going to be talking about tax reforms, and the bonus segment that's going to be posted to podcasts everywhere and YouTube, that'll go over the rest. So just bear with me. When you see them on the ballot, they're going to be in order from number 1 to number 17. But today I'm going to take them out of order because it helps me to understand it better and talk about it so that you can understand it better when I group them into different groups. So the first one is the capital gains tax ban. This is proposition number 2. The ballot language is going to say, the constitutional amendment prohibiting the imposition of a tax on the realized or unrealized capital gains of an individual, family, estate, or trust. Now, you might be wondering, why is there going to be a proposed amendment to the Texas Constitution about this? Because we don't currently have any state capital gains tax. Well, the reason that some people wanted to amend the Constitution is to make sure no future legislature would impose a capital gains tax. And so, do you think that that's a good idea to tie the hands of a future legislature? Or are you happy that their hands are going to be tied? They're not going to be able to impose a capital gains tax on you unless there's another amendment to the Texas Constitution. Just makes you think, right? Well, this is where you can have an impact. This is where your vote counts. And so I'm not going to tell you how to vote. I want you to vote the way that you want to vote. But I do want you to vote. So go vote on November 4th. You can go online and search for Bexar County election. If you're listening in Bexar County, of course, you might be listening in Comal County or Guadalupe County, or even down in Corpus Christi. That's Nueces County. I think our signal goes that far. So that's proposition number 2, capital gains tax. Next, I want to talk about proposition number 6. It's a securities tax ban. What the ballot language says is the constitutional amendment prohibiting the legislature from enacting a law imposing an occupation tax on certain entities that enter into transactions conveying securities or imposing a tax on certain securities transactions. So why is this amendment being proposed? Well, you might remember hearing in the news that there's a new stock exchange in Texas, and so my theory is that the governor and the legislators wanted to make us a more friendly state for that securities exchange by saying that there's not going to be any future tax imposed on those who work in that industry or any of the transactions that they make. So this is potentially good economics for that industry. And so if you think that's a good idea, then you would vote for this. If you don't want to tie the legislature's hands by saying that they're prohibited from imposing a tax in this area, then you would vote against it. The next ban on taxes is the ban on inheritance tax in Texas. And currently there is no inheritance tax in Texas. But again, this would tie the hands of a future legislature, say that the legislature is not allowed to impose an inheritance tax unless there's another constitutional amendment. So the ballot language says the constitutional amendment to prohibit the legislature from imposing death taxes applicable to a decedent's property or the transfer of an estate, inheritance, legacy, succession, or gift. So you know Marquardt Law Firm sponsors the show, and attorneys at Marquardt Law Firm focus on business and estate law, including last wills, living trusts, and tax-protected inheritance plans. It's all about legacy. So this applies directly to the people that I help every single day, people that are trying to leave an inheritance or those who are trying to collect an inheritance through a will or through a trust. So do you think that it's a good idea to tie the hands of the legislature to make sure that they can't impose an inheritance tax? Or do you think that we should let the future legislatures do what's needed for the time and situation at hand? So I'll let you be the judge of that. The next section of proposals I call inventory taxes, and the first one is proposition number 5. It's about animal feed, and the ballot language says the constitutional amendment authorizing the legislature to exempt from ad valorem taxation tangible personal property consisting of animal feed held by the owner of the property for sale at retail. So this would essentially make animal feed inventory for a rancher, and so this would help that segment of our economy, the ranching industry. And so if you think that's a good idea, maybe it'll promote lower prices on beef, for example, because it brings the cost down for the rancher. maybe that's a good idea, or maybe you don't want to tie the legislature's hands again. The next proposal is Proposition number 9, the inventory and equipment tax exemption. The ballot language says the constitutional amendment to authorize the legislature to exempt from ad valorem taxation a portion of the market value of tangible personal property a person owns that is held or used for the production of income. So this is not applying to just ranchers or farmers or animal raisers, but this applies to all businesses. So it would have to be accompanied by other legislation from the legislature to exempt up to $125,000 of business inventory or equipment from being taxed by school districts, cities, counties, or other taxing entity. So you might not know this, but businesses have to pay tax on the inventory and equipment that they have in their business. It's a separate property tax. So you have to pay property tax on your building if you own your office building or your retail center, and then you also have to pay tax on the stuff that you're going to sell to the public or the equipment that you use in running your business. And so this Proposition number 9 would authorize the legislature to exempt a certain portion of the market value of tangible personal property if it's used for the production of income. So that sounds like a business-friendly proposal there. And if you want Texas to be a business-friendly state, then maybe you vote for this. If you don't think that the Constitution should be used to prohibit the legislature from enacting laws that they think are reasonable and necessary for the time and situation of the state, then you might vote against it. So again, I'm dedicating this show to helping you understand what the proposals to amend the Texas Constitution are, because there's an election on Tuesday, November 4th. So make sure you put it on your calendar, put it on your electronic device, your smart mobile device in the calendar so that you can remember to wake up early and go vote or vote on your lunch break. But this is one of the rights that we have in the state of Texas to vote and in the United States. And so we should exercise our rights so that we can maintain those rights. And so I sort of wondered, why are there so many property tax focused amendments? And the reason is Texans hate property taxes. It's one of the largest taxes that we pay if you're a homeowner or if you own property or real estate, rental properties or vacation properties. This affects all of the property owners, and it sort of makes you feel like that if you don't pay your property taxes, then the government can take it away from you. And so do you really own it if the government can take it away from you? Years ago, there was a woman running for governor, I think her name was Diana Medina, that proposed to eliminate property taxes. Now, excuse me, I don't know how schools would be funded if there were no property tax, but it certainly increases liberty and freedom if there's no property tax. And so I tend to want to support things that enhance our liberty and freedom in Texas and the United States. Of course, the legislature and the governor would have to figure out how to pay for things, especially funding schools and education. I think that schools and education is the best benefit besides protecting us and keeping us safe that the government can do. So I'm a proponent of education. I just wish that it were funded a different way, maybe a sales tax, which is a tax on consumption. That's something that each of us can control. We can decide how much stuff to buy. And so if you want lower taxes, all you have to do is buy less stuff. Now, let me get into this some more. Why so many property tax focused amendments? Well, I'll let you think about that. Let's talk about proposition number 7, which is a tax exemption for veterans' spouses. Now, you might know that a service-connected veteran who has a rating of 70 or above, 70% disabled, they can get an exemption from property taxes now. And so this is for veteran spouses. And the ballot language says, the constitutional amendment authorizing the legislature to provide for an exemption from ad valorem taxation of all or part of the market value of the residence homestead of the surviving spouse of a veteran who died as a result of a condition or disease that is presumed under federal law to have been service-connected. So I tend to want to support veterans. I have a lot of clients who are veterans. I help them apply for benefits like the pension, the aid and attendance benefit, which is not service-connected. I also help service-connected veterans appeal denials of service-connected disability ratings. I think that if you fought and died for our country, then we should support you in any way that we can. Do you agree with that? Do you want to support veterans and their spouses? Or do you not want to tie the legislature's hands? So again, this proposal is to create an amendment that would allow the legislature to offer this exemption to veterans' spouses. So the legislature would have to do something. The next proposal is number 10, and it's to help relieve property taxpayers who have a home that was destroyed by fire. Now, why would you have to pay property taxes based on the value of a house that was still standing when it's been burnt down? It just seems reasonable to me that even without this proposal, that the tax assessor would reassess the value of the property to take into consideration the fact that it was burned down. But here's the ballot language. The constitutional amendment to authorize the legislature to provide for a temporary exemption from ad valorem taxation of the appraised value of an improvement to a residence homestead that is completely destroyed by a fire. So this would allow the legislature to pass that type of exemption. Next is proposition number 11, school tax exemption for the elderly or disabled homeowners. So it's very interesting that this is coming out because I've heard some of my older clients complain about this because they don't have kids in school, presumably if they're older. And so they don't want to pay for school tax if they're not using it. Now, I know that's a bit short-sighted because even if I'm older, I still want children and others to be educated. Otherwise, I'm going to have to live with a bunch of uneducated people. And I think education is one of the best things the government can do other than keeping us safe, free from crime, providing some infrastructure like water and electricity. But I have a soft spot in my heart for older people and those who are chronically ill or disabled because they need help. And I think that as a healthy population, that it's worth the cost to help this population out, older people or disabled. And so here's what the ballot language says. The constitutional amendment authorizing the legislature to increase the amount of the exemption from ad valorem taxation by a school district of the market value of the residence homestead of a person who is elderly or disabled. So currently, I think that there's a $10,000 current exemption from school taxation for those who are over 65 or disabled, and this would increase that to 60,000. That's my understanding of it anyway. Next is number 17, regarding property that's on the border. And so this is another exemption from property tax. So here's the ballot language. The constitutional amendment to authorize the legislature to provide for an exemption from ad valorem taxation of the amount of the market value of real property located in a county that borders the United States and Mexico that arises from the installation or construction of on the property of border security infrastructure and related improvements. So I was sort of thinking that this is where the wall is. If the government builds a wall on your property, you shouldn't have to pay property taxes on the area that wall consumes because you don't get to use it. The government's using it. So that would make sense to me. I don't know if it also includes construction of things that I would build on my own property. So if you know the answer, email me at host@talklawradio.com. That's HOST@talklawradio.com. Let me know whether this is only for a government installation or construction of border security infrastructure and related improvements, or does it relate to those same things that a property owner would build him or herself? The last one is proposition number 13, and it's related to the homestead. The ballot language says the constitutional amendment to increase the amount of the exemption of residence homesteads from ad valorem taxation by a school district from $100,000 to $140,000. And so if you're in favor of reducing property taxes, you might vote for this. Another idea that I had, that my philosophy that relates to taxation, is if taxation is lower, then there will be less government waste, right? Because they have less to spend. They have to be more critical and analytical about what they're going to spend money on. And so I kind of like that idea because I don't think that the government is a good steward of resources. I wanted to hear some opinions from regular people about these proposals, and so I looked on X, formerly known as Twitter, and one person under the handle Save the Union says, "Vote no on all of them. Here's why. None of this belongs in the state constitution. These are all substantive legislative issues, period. Make the legislature do their job." Do you agree with that? Here's another opinion. By the same person. We had the same problem when I was in Florida. Special interest groups became frustrated that they couldn't get their issues passed by the legislature, and so they turned to constitutional ballot measures. And voters are not informed and usually just vote yes. But the state constitution is organizational law, not substantive. What will happen if all these property tax exemptions for different groups pass? Then everyone else's taxes will rise. So those are just some opinions. And so I want you to know that there's more. I just talked about the tax issues. So I need for you to search for the Texas constitutional ballot measures on podcasts everywhere, on YouTube. I'm going to have a bonus segment that is only available on podcasts and on YouTube. So search for Talk Law Radio podcast or Talk Law Radio YouTube and look for the Lady Justice in the red, white, and blue logo so that you can get the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say. I call these the 7 sleeper amendments. that could tie a judge's hands regarding bail, or removing your elected judges without your permission, as well as tie the legislature's hands regarding technical school funding, water, and Alzheimer's research. We're dropping a no-holds-barred bonus episode breaking down every hidden proposition the politicians don't want you to notice. I'm Todd Marquardt. This is Talk Law Radio. I'll talk to you later.